Madison thought she was fighting alone, using her art to cover treatment costs. But when the vice president passed by, everything changed in ways she never imagined. The wind carried the scent of damp earth as the late afternoon sun stretched over Good Old Park in Columbus, Ohio. The usual buzz of joggers, dog walkers, and families filled the air, but among it all, a small wooden table stood out. On it were vibrant watercolor paintings, each telling a story of hope and resilience. Behind the table sat Madison, a delicate yet determined 12-year-old girl, smudged with blue and red paint as she carefully arranged her work. Madison had been setting up her table every weekend, rain or shine, offering her art with a quiet smile. 6 months ago, she was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, a word that crushed her family under a mountain of fear and medical bills. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. So Madison decided to sell her paintings. She had always loved painting since she was young, using it to escape the hospital's sterile walls. One day, she asked her mom if they could sell her artwork to help with expenses. Though concerned about her exhaustion, her mother saw Madison's resolve and supported the idea. At first, people just glanced at her art, but soon, curiosity grew into something more. Some admired the pieces, others bought them, leaving donations or words of encouragement. One day, an elderly woman asked about a painting of a tree against a stormy sky. Madison explained it symbolized standing strong in tough times. The woman then pulled out her wallet, but not everyone understood. Some assumed it was a school project, while one man dismissed her work as overly dramatic. Madison's mother tensed, but Madison didn't let it bother her. She had faced worse whispers at school, where people didn't understand her hair loss or frequent absences. Then, one afternoon, a black SUV pulled up, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a navy jacket, hands in his pockets, scanning the scene. Madison didn't recognize him, but her mother whispered, "That's JD Vance." He was a well-known politician. He stopped in front of Madison's table, intently examining her paintings. He picked up her favorite piece, a painting of a phoenix rising from ash, a symbol of strength she painted during a particularly painful treatment. He asked, "Is this yours?" Madison nodded. He studied the painting and asked her to tell him about it. "It's about getting back up when everything falls apart," she said. Vance's expression softened, and he shared a similar saying from his grandmother, "You decide when you're finished." Then he turned to her mother, asking how much the painting was. Madison had priced it at $40, but she said, "Really, whatever you think is fair." Vance smiled, pulling out a $100 bill, then added more before turning to his security detail. Madison and her mother were stunned. Vance then asked Madison's mother about their fundraising efforts. She explained how the costs of treatments were piling up. Vance listened attentively, then sat down, asking Madison what was the hardest part. Madison replied, "The tiredness, not just from chemo, but from feeling like I have to prove I'm more than just this diagnosis." Vance nodded, saying he understood more than she probably thought. He then spoke gently, offering his help, showing a deep understanding of her struggle. "You already have the painting, I mean really help," Vance said, his tone making Madison's stomach flip. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, and slid it across the table. Madison's mother hesitated before picking it up. Her eye scanned the page, and her breath hitched. "What is this?" she whispered. Madison leaned over to look. The words didn't make sense at first, but then they clicked. It was confirmation of a donation large enough to cover her entire treatment. Every appointment, every hospital stay, every bill paid in full. Her mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Madison's chest tightened. "I don't understand," she whispered. Vance smiled softly. "You don't have to. Just know that sometimes, the world gives back to people who refuse to give up." Madison couldn't breathe, and in that moment, everything changed. The world around them felt distant, like the hum of the park faded into the background. Her mother, trembling, clutched the paper, struggling for words. Madison could only stare at JD Vance, unable to comprehend what had just happened. She had been used to people buying her paintings, offering encouragement, but no one had ever done something like this. Vance must have noticed her disbelief because he leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I know this might feel overwhelming," he said, his voice steady, "but you deserve a fighting chance. If what I can give makes that fight a little easier, then it's worth it." Madison opened her mouth, then closed it. Her chest tightened, but not like after a round of chemo. This was different. "But why?" she asked, unable to stop herself. Vance studied her for a moment, then exhaled through his nose. "Because I've seen what it's like when people fight and don't get the help they need. My mom struggled a lot when I was a kid. Life wasn't easy, and there were times I didn't know if we'd make it." He paused, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. "But there were people who stepped in and helped. I never forgot that." Madison swallowed, understanding the fight all too well. Still, she shook her head. "But I didn't do anything special." Vance smiled, eyes knowing. "Didn't you?" He picked up the Phoenix painting, holding it gently. "You took something painful and turned it into this. You didn't just sit back and let life happen to you. You made something, and people feel that. I felt that. That's rare, Madison." Her throat tightened. She could hear her mother sniffling quietly beside her. For months, it had felt like she was just trying to keep her head above water, doing what she could to help her family in an impossible situation. But now, she realized someone had noticed. Someone had seen her. Vance checked his watch and sighed. "I wish I could stay longer, but I have another engagement." Madison didn't want him to go, not because he was the vice president, but because for the first time, someone understood. "Will you, keep the painting?" she asked. Vance smiled, a little taken aback. "Of course. It's one of the most meaningful things I've ever bought." Madison dipped her brush into gold paint and carefully signed the canvas. "Keep fighting," she wrote next to her signature. She slid the painting back toward him. "Now it's finished." Vance looked at the words for a moment, then nodded, tucking the canvas under his arm. "I'll do that," he said, then with a small smile, "and you do the same." Madison grinned, blinking away tears. She didn't know it yet, but this moment would change more than her life. JD Vance gave her mother a reassuring nod before stepping away, the painting tucked under his arm. As he turned, whispers spread through the small crowd. People pulled out their phones, others nudged each other, as if confirming they had just witnessed something extraordinary. But Madison barely noticed. Her fingers rested on the table, hovering over the fresh gold paint she'd used to sign the canvas. The world felt heavier yet lighter at the same time. Her mother exhaled sharply, pressing a hand to her chest. "Did that just happen?" Madison's voice was quiet. "I think so." Before they could process it, one of Vance's security agents approached, handing Madison's mother a sleek black card with embossed gold lettering. "The vice president asked me to pass this along," the agent said. "If you need anything at all, call this number. No press, no cameras, just help." Her mother, trembling, whispered a soft thank you. Madison took a slow breath. For the first time in months, the weight of treatment and uncertainty didn't feel as crushing. But the moment wasn't over. A man in a faded brown jacket stepped forward, pulling out a few folded bills and placing them on the table. Then another person stepped up, and another. A woman in running gear fumbled for her phone. "Do you have Venmo?" she asked. "I don't have cash, but I want to help." Madison's mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling onto her cheeks. It was like a dam had broken. Once people realized they could do something, they did. A young couple bought 2 paintings, even though they admitted they had no space for them. A college student left a $20 bill and walked away without taking anything, shaking his head as if he had no words. Madison looked around, overwhelmed. She had spent months fighting, feeling alone, but now people were stepping up beside her. She turned to her mother. "This is real, right?" Her mother laughed through her tears, pulling her into a tight hug. "It's real, baby. It's real." But even as Madison clung to her mother, her heart pounding with disbelief and gratitude, she had no idea just how far this moment would reach. By the next morning, the entire country would know her name. Madison woke up to the sound of her mother's phone buzzing. Her mother groggily reached for it, then froze. "Madison, it's the hospital." Madison's stomach twisted. "Is something wrong?" Her mother shook her head. "No, they want to talk to you." Madison's heart pounded as her mother answered the phone, her brows furrowed in confusion, then lifted in shock. "Wait, what? You're serious? Oh my God." She ended the call, still staring at the phone. "Mom, what did they say?" Madison whispered. Her mother, blinking rapidly, processed the words before speaking. "The hospital just told me someone made an anonymous donation. They covered everything. Every single treatment. You don't owe them another dime." Madison's breath hitched. That was him, wasn't it? They both knew without saying it. But that was only the beginning. Her mother's phone buzzed again. Texts, emails, and social media notifications poured in. Madison unlocked her phone and gasped. Her story was everywhere. News outlets had covered what happened at the park, and now it had exploded nationally. People were sharing videos, retelling the moment JD Vance had bought her painting and quietly ensured she got the treatment she needed. Her fundraising page had skyrocketed, with thousands of strangers contributing. Some left messages of encouragement, others simply gave what they could. Tears filled Madison's eyes as she scrolled through the names: teachers, parents, students, cancer survivors, even kids her own age. Strangers who cared enough to help. Her mother, crying, held her phone as if it were the most fragile thing in the world. "Madison," she said, "you don't just have enough for your treatment anymore. You have enough to help other kids too." Madison's chest swelled. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about pain or uncertainty. She was thinking about what she could do for others. For the first time, she realized this fight had never been just hers. In the days that followed, reporters asked for interviews. Madison's story was shared on national television. Schools reached out, asking if she would visit to talk about her art. Messages flooded in, some from cancer patients who saw themselves in her journey, others from strangers who simply wanted to say they believed in her. Through it all, Madison stayed grounded. She still painted, still set up her table at Goodale Park, but now things were different. People didn't just stop by to buy her art, they came to share their struggles, to remind her that kindness still existed. One afternoon, as she packed up her supplies, her mother received a call from a non-profit working with kids battling cancer. "They want you to help design a program," her mother said, eyes shining. "An art therapy initiative for kids going through treatment." Madison's heart skipped a beat. She had been painting to escape her own pain, but now she had the chance to give others that same feeling. That night, she picked up her brush with new purpose. JD Vance had set something in motion, but it wasn't about money or politics. It was about something bigger: what happens when one person chooses to see another, to step in, to do what they can. She thought back to his words, "Sometimes the world gives back to people who refuse to give up." Madison wasn't giving up. She was just getting started. Because sometimes, hope doesn't come in grand gestures or headlines. Sometimes it's in a brushstroke, a shared story, a small act of kindness that changes everything. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of compassion and resilience, share it. Because you never know who might need to hear it. And if you ever wonder whether a single person can make a difference, Madison is living proof that they can.